wind clawed through the dry grass like it was angry at the world. Evening shadows stretched long across the dirt road where the girl stood, fists balled tight, eyes burning hotter than the dying sun. Her stepfather reeked of whiskey, boots planted wide, grin twisted as he shoved the rolled-up deed papers into his coat pocket like a prize he hadn't earned. "You can't take it," she said, voice trembling but loud enough to stop men in the street. "This treachery won't stand." The words cracked through the air like a gunshot. Heads turned, but no one moved. He chuckled low, a sound like gravel under boots. "Girl, everything here's mine now. House, land, even you, if I say so." Her face went pale, but her eyes never broke from his. Across the road, the rancher leaned against a fence post, hat brim pulled low, arms crossed. He had seen men like this before, drunk on power as much as whiskey, and knew too well how it ended. The outlaw yanked the papers higher, shaking them like a victory flag. "Witness it, folks. This here's the law now." But there was no law in the way he laughed, in the way he shoved her back so hard she hit the dust with a cry. The rancher's jaw tightened. No one spoke. Not the blacksmith by the well, nor the preacher on the steps. Just the wind, slipping through the silent street like even it didn't want to stay. The outlaw swung up onto his horse, spurs clinking, eyes glinting in the last scrap of daylight. "She's got nothing," he spat, voice thick with drink. "And tomorrow, she's got less." He yanked the reins, horse rearing before thundering down the road, laughter fading into the dusk. The girl stayed on her knees in the dust, shoulders trembling but chin lifting slow like fire rising from embers. The rancher didn't move at first, just watched. The sun sank behind him, lanterns flickered on, and the wind carried her words again, softer this time. But steady. "This treachery won't stand. Not tonight. Not ever again." Night closed in like a hunter, shadows spilling over the land until even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Down by the creek, the outlaw's boots sank into the mud as he dragged the girl by the arm, her wrists already raw from the rope biting deep. Moonlight flashed on his whiskey bottle before he hurled it into the dark water with a hollow splash. "Step off me," she shouted, voice breaking against the night. He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound, and shoved her forward so hard she nearly fell. "Ain't no one coming for you out here. No one ever does." The water hissed at the bank like it could taste what was coming. He tied her wrist tighter, then, with a grunt, shoved her into the black water. The cold hit her like a fist. The current dragged hard, pulling her under, rope slicing against her skin as she thrashed. For a moment, the world turned silent except for the river swallowing her screams. On the far ridge, the rancher heard it, faint, desperate, almost carried away by the wind. He swung onto his horse, spurs biting into its flanks as they tore down the slope, hooves pounding through sage and dust. By the time he reached the bank, the outlaw was gone, just shadows in the brush. But the girl, he saw her, barely above water, eyes wide in the moonlight, ropes pulling her down like the river had claws. "Hold on!" he roared, diving from the saddle. The creek swallowed him whole. Cold wrapped tight around his chest as he fought the current, knife flashing in his hand before he hacked through the ropes. Her body went limp, face pale as he hauled her back to shore. Water streamed off them both as he dropped to his knees, laying her on the mud. "Breathe," he muttered, voice raw. "Come on, girl, breathe." She coughed hard, water bursting from her lungs, the sound mixing with the rush of the river lane. The land itself had been holding its breath for her. Somewhere in the distance a coyote cried. The rancher pulled her close to the fire of his coat. "You're safe now," but both of them knew the night wasn't done yet. The cabin door groaned as the rancher kicked it open, rainwater dripping from his hat brim, boots thudding heavy on the wooden floor. He laid her down by the hearth, where the fire still burned low, its glow flickering over her pale face. She trembled hard, teeth chattering as he wrapped her in a thick wool blanket. Steam rose from her soaked dress, hair plastered to her cheeks. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like the night itself wanted in. He poured black coffee into a tin cup, hands steady despite the storm raging beyond the walls. "Here," he said, voice low, calm as the firelight. Her fingers shook around the cup. He tried to kill me." The words cracked like dry wood snapping. The rancher squatted beside her, face rough, eyes steady on hers. "I saw enough." He tossed another log onto the fire. Sparks leapt, shadows dancing along the walls like ghosts. She looked toward the door, fear sliding back into her gaze. "He'll come again." "I know it." He set his rifle against the table, the steel catching the firelight. "Let him," he said, jaw tight. "This land's got a way of dealing with men like him." For a while, neither spoke. Only the storm filled the silence, rain hammering the roof, wind screaming through the pines. Finally she whispered, "You don't even know me. Why help?" The rancher leaned back against the wall, eyes on the flames. "Don't need to know you," he said. "Just need to know right from wrong." Outside, thunder rolled slow across the hills like a warning. She pulled the blanket tighter, watching the fire crackle, color returning slowly to her face. There was still fear in her eyes, but something else too. Resolve. The rancher poured himself a cup, sipped once, then nodded toward the bed in the corner. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we ride to town. Tell the law what happened." She met his eyes for the first time without flinching. "And if he comes before then?" The rancher glanced at the rifle, then back at her. "Then he won't leave." Dawn broke slow over the hills, bleeding gold across the frost-bitten grass. The cabin sat quiet, smoke curling from the chimney like a lone sentinel in the wild. Inside, the girl slept by the dying fire, but the rancher was already at the window, coffee in one hand, rifle leaning against the wall. He knew men like the outlaw never stayed gone long. Hoofbeats broke the silence. 3 riders. Dust rising behind them like a storm. The outlaw reined in hard, his grin wide, eyes red from whiskey and rage. 2 henchmen flanked him, rifles slung, spurs clinking as they rode closer. The rancher stepped out, door swinging shut behind him, hat low, shoulders square. The sun hit the rifle barrel in his hand, glinting sharp. "Morning," the outlaw called, voice dripping venom. "Got something of mine inside, rancher." The rancher's boots planted firm in the dirt. "She ain't yours." The outlaw laughed, hollow and cruel. "You think you can keep her? Think you can stand against me and my boys?" The rancher didn't flinch. "Not thinkin', I knowin'." One henchman shifted in the saddle, hand twitching near his holster. The air turned thick, the kind of silence where even the wind seemed to hide. The girl opened the door just enough to see. Her heart pounded, but she held her breath, eyes locked on the men who'd left her to die. "You give her up," the outlaw said, voice dropping low, "and maybe we let you live." The rancher leveled his rifle, steady as a church bell. "You ain't riding through that gate unless it's feet first." For a moment no one moved. Horses stamped nervously, breath steaming in the cold air. Then the outlaw smirked, reins creaking as he turned his horse. "Not today, rancher, but soon." The 3 riders wheeled around, dust swallowing them as they vanished into the hills, leaving only the echo of hooves and a promise of blood. The rancher lowered his rifle slowly. "They'll be back," the girl whispered from the doorway. He nodded once, jaw set like stone. "Then we'll be ready." The morning sun stretched over the prairie, painting the town in warm gold, but inside the sheriff's office the air was heavy with dust and tension. The girl's hands trembled as she handed over her story, ink smudging the edges of her testimony. Each word tasted like ash, but she spoke anyway, voice quivering yet sharp. He tried to take everything. My land. My life." The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man with lines carved deep into his face, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His eyes softened as they met hers. "We'll make it right," he said. "The law's got teeth. even if men like him don't respect it. Outside, townsfolk paused in the street, curious eyes peeking from behind shutters. Whispers ran through saloons and blacksmith shops. The outlaw's name was already known, but now it had a face, a girl who refused to be broken. The rancher stood tall beside her, boots planted in the dust. His hat shadowed his eyes, but the set of his jaw told her all she needed to know. "You're not alone in this," he murmured. The judge, a stern man with a voice like gravel, promised a hearing at first light. The preacher offered quiet prayers, hands clasped, murmuring words that floated into the wooden rafters of the chapel. The girl's eyes followed the sun as it climbed, spilling light over the courthouse steps, washing the rough stone with hope. The wind carried faint scents of hay and sage, symbols of the land she still had a claim to, the life she could reclaim. She clutched the deed papers tighter, feeling their weight, their promise. "It has to be enough," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The rancher's gaze swept the street, noting every shadow, every whisper of movement. "Justice has a way of catching up," he said quietly, voice steady as TM, a rifle at his side. For the first time since the night at the creek, she felt it, a spark of something that wasn't fear. Not quite courage, not quite relief, but hope. And in the distance, the outlaw's name lingered in whispers like smoke, a reminder that danger hadn't vanished, only delayed. The girl squared her shoulders, inhaling the crisp prairie air. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow it ends." The rancher nodded, tipping his hat to the rising sun. "Tomorrow, we finish what's started." The wind carried the words across the town, wrapping them around the dusted streets, lanterns, and shuttered windows. Justice, for now, was waiting. Night fell like a velvet curtain, shadows pooling across the ranch as the wind whispered through the dry grass. Lanterns swung gently in the breeze, casting fractured light across the cabin walls. Inside, the girl sat by the hearth, fingers wrapped around a cup of warm tea, eyes wide and restless. She could hear it, the low rhythm of hooves, the scrape of metal, the unmistakable presence of men who thought fear could be commanded. The outlaw had returned, not alone. 6 riders, torches blazing like fire devils, cut through the darkness, circling the ranch like wolves scenting prey. Their laughter cracked through the night, jagged and cruel, carrying the promise of violence. The rancher moved like a shadow, rifle in hand, boots soft on the wooden floor. He checked the windows, then the door, every hinge, every lock, every weak point. "Stay behind me," he said. His voice was low but firm, the kind that carried weight without raising it. Outside, the outlaws began pounding on the barn door, splinters flying with each strike, horses stamped in the corral, nostrils flaring, hooves kicking dust into the moonlight. The girl flinched with each slam, but the rancher's hand found hers, steady, grounding. "Not tonight," he growled through clench teeth. "Not ever." A torch hit the ground, sparks scattering across dry wood, and fire threatened to catch. Bullets whined past the cabin, splintering the shutters, sending shards into the night air. The girl ducked behind barrels, breath caught in her throat, heart hammering like a drum. She watched as the rancher fired, one shot dropping a rider who'd leaned too close. Sparks flew from the rifle, lighting his determined face in brief, cinematic bursts of heroism. The outlaws faltered, regrouping in the darkness, voices sharp with frustration. They hadn't expected resistance like this. A lone man guarding what he knew was right. From the shadows, the rancher's voice cut clear. "You leave or you die." For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then the outlaws retreated, torches swinging wildly, hooves thundering as they vanished into the night, leaving only smoke, splintered wood, and the acrid scent of gunpowder. The girl exhaled slowly, shaking, but the firelight caught in her eyes. No longer just fear, but the first sparks of defiance. The rancher lowered his rifle, steady but weary. "They'll be back," he said quietly, "but we'll be ready." Outside, the wind carried the echoes of hooves, a reminder that the night's terror had passed. For now. The night sky was a deep black canvas, stars hidden behind rolling clouds as the outlaw and his gang circled the ranch again, confident, cruel, and certain of victory. But this time, the wind carried something else, the thunder of hooves that weren't theirs. From the ridge, torches bobbing in the dark, the sheriff and his deputies charged, rifles gleaming in the sparse moonlight. Their arrival split the outlaws' confidence in two like lightning cracking over the prairie. Inside the cabin, the girl pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, ears straining. The rancher moved like a shadow, rifle ready, eyes scanning every dark corner. "Stay down," he whispered. "They're coming." Outside, chaos erupted. The outlaws fired blindly, sparks from gunfire flying into the night. Horses screamed and reared, throwing riders to the ground. The sheriff barked commands, steady and relentless. "Round 'em up, now!" The rancher stepped into the fray, fists swinging, boots digging into the mud. One of the henchmen lunged at him, but a swift uppercut sent him sprawling. The outlaw, seeing his gang falter, cursed and drew his pistol, but the sheriff's deputy had him covered, rifle steady, gaze locked. The girl watched from the doorway as the tide turned. Men who had seemed unstoppable now fell to the law, struggling, cursing, dragged into chains. Sparks from torches illuminated the outlaw's snarling face as the rancher tackled him, mud and rain mingling on their clothes. "Not again," the outlaw spat, spitting blood onto the wet earth. "Justice doesn't wait," the rancher said, voice low but fierce. The sheriff moved in, cuffs clicking, chain rattling, closing the circle. The remaining gang members were rounded up, defeated, no longer a threat. The girl stepped out from the cabin, rain-soaked hair plastered to her face, relief and awe mingling in her eyes. The rancher offered a hand, steady and reassuring. "It's over," he said. The sheriff nodded at him, a rare smile breaking across his face. "For tonight, the law held. You held better." The wind began to ease, carrying away the gunpowder and the shouts, leaving only the smell of wet earth and smoke. For the first time since the creek, the girl felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by something heavier, steadier, hope. And as the clouds parted, revealing faint stars above, she whispered, almost to herself, "We did it." The rancher's eyes scanned the horizon. "Tonight," he said, "justice rode faster than fear."